Scientists on podcasts. Everywhere I look these days, there are first-class researchers spreading their knowledge to help educate millions of people, and also usually to sell a book, which is fine. Self-promotion is a necessary thing in this digital space. Hey, did you guys know I have a Patreon now? If you want to support me in exchange for exclusive content and contact with me, then check it out below. If not, that's totally cool. Hey, get out of here. No. Anyways, it's obviously a great thing that people with doctorates and real-world experience get to speak on these platforms. Because, you know, there's a lot of misinformation out there, and surely these experts are rectifying it. I mean, there's no way that they're contributing to the spreading of misinformation themselves, because that would be really bad. Today, I'm talking about an episode of The Diary of a CEO. Actually, it's the most watched episode of The Diary of a CEO at 12 million views, featuring Dr. Tara Swart, who has a PhD and an MD, making her a double doctor, and making it insane just how many inaccurate things she says. She's also apparently the #1 neuroscientist, so I guess she's the highest rated on the neuroscience leaderboards, because that's how it works. But seriously though, how many #1 neuroscientists are there? I should start all my video titles with #1 genius to ever live, maybe then I'll get more views. To set the stage, the theme of this episode is stress. Dr. Swart starts off by talking about cortisol being the hormone involved in the stress process, and how high levels of it impact your body, mind, and the people around you.
And that cortisol courses around your blood through your entire body and brain, and the brain has receptors for understanding what's going on in terms of threat to your survival.
This is pretty fundamental, proven stuff, nothing to criticize here. This next part is where I start to have some problems.
Because I had a thesis, I googled, is stress contagious? And it came up and it said it was contagious. Or is it contagious? And more importantly, how and why is it contagious?
Okay, I will tell you the answer to that, but I'm going to ask you a question first. Have you ever walked into a room with someone and by the time you've left that meeting with them, you just feel so drained? Yeah, you know, so you know the feeling. So I'll tell you how it works physiologically. I'm going to start with something else to like build you up to this story. So did you know that women who live together or work closely together will synchronize their menstrual periods within 2 or 3 months?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're starting with the old period synchronization thing, which is a myth. Let me just say though, I do not menstruate, so if I'm missing some perspective here, let me know. But I'm just gonna go with what the evidence suggests. But yeah, the idea that periods synchronize when females spend a lot of time with each other was first proposed over 50 years ago by Barbara McClintock, who found this effect occurring in girls' college dorms and hypothesized that it was due to circulating pheromones. Since then, it's kind of circulated by word of mouth and is accepted as fact by a lot of people. Except pretty much every study since that initial one has been unable to show this effect. A 2006 review of several studies showed that none of them had any evidence of period synchronization. Information from the period tracking app Clue was unable to find that periods reliably synced over time. And if you do the math, it kind of shows that it's more likely due to chance and confirmation bias that this idea is still around. So she started off by confidently stating a myth as a fact, which as a doctor is not great.
I found this out many years ago and it has completely changed my perception on so many things. And when I heard about that, I checked it was true, found out it was true.
That's weird because I checked and I found that it wasn't true. Actually, one Google search will tell you that, so I don't know where you're checking, Steven.
And it broke the frame in which I think, because if there are if it's possible that invisible forces now between me and you are interacting with our bodies, okay, well then what else is possible? Sorry.
I'm already using a certain form of eye contact with you to create emotional resonance.
What have you done to me?
We're going to get sidetracked. Do you want to go back to the hormone?
What kind of eye contact are you using with me?
Certain form of eye contact? I just learned how to make regular eye contact. Now you're telling me there are variants? Also kind of irrelevant, but Steven said invisible forces, and then she brought up eye contact, which is one of the most visible things there is, last time I checked.
So when a baby is born, one of the ways that it learns what emotion the mum's experiencing, how it understands its own emotions, you know, everything that grows over childhood and teenage into, you know, pro-social behavior, starts off mostly with eye contact with the mum. So most people are right-handed, so they'll be holding their baby in their left arm so they can still use their dominant hand to do stuff. And that means that when you gaze at your baby, your right eye is looking into their left eye, and it's creating this emotional resonance loop that's part of how the mother and the baby bond. So that right eye to left eye contact is the most bonding eye contact that you can have with someone.
Okay. what is she talking about? So it's true that eye contact with mother and baby is very important for bonding and intimacy, and even with adults, eye contact helps with bonding, but I don't know where she got this right eye, left eye thing from. If you're making eye contact with a baby, or with anyone for that matter, are both eyes not looking at both eyes? And even if the right eye was looking into the left eye, then wouldn't the left eye be looking into the right eye?
Just want to make sure I've got that clearly in my mind so I could repeat that to someone else.
It's great for dating.
Yeah, of course it is. The reason that works is because there's this association in our brains that if someone is looking into your left eye, it kind of triggers something, a bonding response that is quite innate in us.
Yeah.
Is that the TLDR of it?
Yeah.
Okay. It's a nice little trick to look into someone's left eye. I'm going to only look into your left eye for the rest of the
With your right eye.
How do I'm just looking with both.
Yeah, you feel like that. But once you start doing this, I promise you will notice a difference.
Okay.
See, Stephen has the same question that I do, but she just kind of brushes it off and says, try it, you'll figure it out. But I've been trying to do this since I started working on this video, and I've so far been unable to look into someone's left eye with only my right eye. Like, I can look into the left eye or into the right eye, but not just one to one. My eyes move as a unit. Am I crazy, or am I just not a chameleon? Like, here, Okay, so I'm gonna try it with Gara here. See, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. I can't look at one thing with one eye. Thank you, Gara. And even if it was possible to do that, there's no evidence of it creating greater resonance than regular eye contact. You would have to prove that with a controlled experiment where you survey mothers to see if they held a baby in their left or right arm. Then you would have to take their grown kids and make them look into the eyes of strangers, and I guess those strangers would be randomly assigned to look into their left eye or their right eye with the appropriate eye. And then you'd have to compare that to kids who looked into someone making regular eye contact with them. You'd have to measure the emotional resonance that results, and you'd have to find a statistically significant improvement in emotional resonance from the special kind of eye contact to the regular eye contact. This would be a very long and intense study and run into a lot of methodological problems. Basically, it's never been done. I don't know where she's getting this from. Pretty sure it's complete BS. Look at me with your left eye, guys. Are you resonating with me yet? Like this video.
Okay, so let's go back to this hormone conversation. We'll take that off the shelf.
So you started by setting the scene with the fact that women who interact with each other physically closely, they synchronize their menstrual cycles. So when we were living in the cave, the men hunted and gathered and lived quite nomadically. So sometimes they would go away for months at a time. And actually, if they went far enough away and were closer to another cave of the same tribe, they would actually just stay there and never return to the original tribe.
You know, I wish I wore glasses so I can take them off in astonishment, because the amount of inaccuracies in that one sentence alone was crazy. We gotta go back and break it down.
So when we were living in the cave...
Humans didn't live in caves. This has long been debunked. It's also a myth. Ancient humans definitely made use of caves here and there, but all evidence suggests that it was only for short periods of time. Humans were more likely nomadic. The traditional idea of a caveman is caused by a bias from most remnants that we find of ancient humans being found in caves. Not because humans spent all their time in them, but because fossils and other remains are more likely to be preserved there than outside in the savannah or woodlands or places where humans likely spent most of their time. You gotta remember that agriculture was not a thing for most of human evolution, so it'd be really hard to stay in one place for a long time and continue to collect resources.
The men hunted and gathered and lived quite nomadically.
Okay, the women definitely gathered too. It doesn't take a big, strong, biological male to pick berries and find useful pieces of grass. And if you look at the people that are still living as hunter-gatherers today, very often do women and even the children help with foraging. Also, she's saying only the men lived nomadically? I don't know where she's getting this from. I've never heard of any sex-based nomadicity.
Nomadicity.
Again, there are groups of people that still live nomadically today, and I don't think any of them have the kind of system that she's describing.
So sometimes they would go away for months at a time. They went far enough away and were closer to another cave of the same tribe, they would actually just stay there and never return to the original tribe.
So if the men left for weeks or months or forever, and they did all the hunting and gathering, then what did the women do? Just not eat? and die? Wouldn't it be easier to bring the women along? Also, I don't mean this in a crass way, just strictly in terms of evolutionary fitness. Females are a valuable resource for males. They give the ability to produce offspring, which in the context of natural selection is the most important thing. That's why so much of male evolution is about impressing a female for the opportunity to mate. There is no circumstance where all the males would just leave the females defenseless and without food for months. That would just kill their chances of reproduction. Also, she said if the males bump into another tribe, they'll just stay with them and never come back. Where did she get this from? There's no evidence for any of this. We don't even know that much about ancient human behaviors, but with what we do know, that seems unlikely.
And in those days, the most fundamental important thing for the survival of the human species was that the alpha male must pass on his genes. So if he was going to be away for months and there weren't men there to defend the women from predators, maybe there was going to be a spell of the Ice Age and they would all freeze to death.
A spell of the Ice Age? I'm pretty sure it was an age. I don't think it was just a thing that happened all the time. Oh no, it's ice aging outside. Guess we can't go home. Well, how do you know it's an ice age and not just a blizzard? Because of that mammoth? Oh shit. Dude, I think it's coming towards us. Don't worry, I got this. What the fuck is happening? Also, in a biological context, there is no such thing as an alpha male. That's another myth. The original idea of an alpha comes from wolves, where the strongest would lead the pack. But in reality, wolf packs are usually just families where the parents are the leaders. Alpha males are now just a social construct in humans, which is fine, but there's nothing more to it. Now, there are dominance hierarchies in people, but this is a complicated thing. And while dominance status does affect mating chances, it probably isn't to the degree where one alpha gets all the females.
He needed to make sure that at least 5 women were impregnated with his sperm at the same time. So that if there was a food shortage or there was like stillbirth or miscarriage or whatever, at least 1 out of 5 would survive. So to be able to do that, they had to be fertile at the same time. So that's why that mechanism exists.
Hold on, so she's saying that the males would not only leave the females alone for months, the alpha male would impregnate them all first? I can't think of a better way to ensure the downfall of the human race. Also, she said,
most fundamental important thing for the survival of the human species.
That's also not how it works. People are selfish creatures. When it comes to sex, we don't act for the good of the human race. We act to propagate our own genes. That's why male competition is a thing. So, all of that bullshit is what she's using to explain period synchronization, which is also probably bullshit, and she's using all this to explain the contagious nature of stress. So
those sex steroid hormones like estrogen and progesterone, they leak out of our sweat about this far around us. And that's why if you're living with another woman or if, you're sitting across the desk every day, particles of hormone from my sweat would go through the skin of the other woman.
If she's within what distance?
I mean, you wouldn't have to be sitting next to each other. If you live together, then that means you're interacting enough that it would happen.
Okay.
Interestingly, it's led by the alpha female.
Alpha female? Dude, look at Steven's face. That was my reaction too, bro. I'm not even gonna go into why this is ridiculous. There's no period syncing and there's no alpha anything.
So, yeah. So you can work out, if you don't know already, who the alpha female is. Well, if basically, let's say my cycles don't change and everyone says, oh, I got my period early or I haven't had my period yet, but now it's started, then that would mean that probably I was the alpha female.
How does the body know who the alpha female is?
That will be to do with levels of testosterone.
Why does that matter who the alpha female is? Why does it matter that they sync up with her?
I don't know if it really matters. I think it's just a case of physiology.
Okay, you can't just say it doesn't matter. You made an argument for this physiological response existing using evolutionary explanations. Then, when Steven asks why it works like that, aka what is the evolutionary explanation, the answer can't just be, I don't know, I think that's just how the physiology works. Do you see the circular reasoning there? And I also had the same question that Steven had. Why would testosterone be relevant here? If you want to convince me that it is, then you have to explain why.
So it's a little bit like in the troops of gorillas, the stress levels of the silverback gorilla affect the other gorillas more than gorillas who are peers to each other. So we have a natural hierarchy. It must be related to survival as well.
Silverbacks are the dominant males in a group of gorillas. We're talking about human females. Also, Of course, if the silverback is stressed, then everyone's gonna be stressed. Because they're huge. The other gorillas aren't stressed because they're sensing his testosterone circulating in the air. It's because they know he could rip their heads off. And this is kind of my problem with her explanation of stress contagion. Like, I do believe that stress is contagious, I just think it more so has to do with social and psychological factors.
So basically, cortisol is a hormone that works in that same way. And this one doesn't matter if you're male or female, but it does matter where you are in the hierarchy of the organization, as I just mentioned. So usually in that conversation that I mentioned to you, where you go into a room and you just feel completely drained afterwards, usually the person that comes out feeling drained is less senior than the person that's had that effect on them. And that's why this is so crucial to leadership, because your stress levels as a leader, as a CEO, are going to have more impact on everybody else.
Again, I could not find any evidence of this being the case. Not of stress contagion via cortisol in the air, or of how your body would know that cortisol in the air belongs to your boss or not. Like, I need a citation for something like this. So I went to her book. Here she writes, "The contagion of stress has been the subject of recent research by a team at this place, blah blah blah. In their study, the mating partners of stressed mice showed similar changes in the neurons that control the brain's response to stress. Even in humans, we still see evidence of women who live together or work closely together synchronizing their menstrual periods in 2 to 3 months. She doesn't cite anything here, of course. Through a similar mechanism, we also influence each other's stress hormone levels by suppressing our own stress." But yeah, let's look at the study that she cited here. This was an experiment in mice. Yeah, so this is something that you'll see people do a lot. They'll use something found in mice and just blindly apply it to humans. Exercise at night will give you better results. In mice. Ketamine may relieve depression. In mice. Drinking Coke may increase testicle size and testosterone. In mice. But yeah, in the study she cited, they found that mice picked up on stress through olfaction after sniffing around on stressed individuals. There was nothing here about cortisol leaving our skin and entering through other people's skin, as mice do not sweat. So I'm calling BS on all of that. There is no evidence of cortisol spreading from our skin to the degree that others can pick up on it. There is no evidence that our bodies can tell who is in a leadership position relative to another just based off that cortisol in the air. And even if these things were true, because I think that they're very possible, they just haven't been tested, so we don't know. There is no evidence to make these claims right now. There are also so many studies that show stress contagion happening non-physiologically. One that I really liked had people listen to voice recordings of people at varying levels of stress, and it found that people experienced higher levels of stress themselves when they listened to the more stress voice recordings. See, there are just too many psychological factors that contribute to stress contagion. If you want to make an argument for a physiological one, you can. You just also have to disentangle the physiological part and the psychological part to have a case. And I don't think anyone's ever done that yet. Okay, that whole first section was very rough. The rest of the podcast gets a bit better. I think it's because it gets a lot less sciencey and more self-helpy, and she seems insightful enough there. But there were plenty more questionable moments. I'm gonna highlight some more of them now, but I'm gonna have a more extensive commentary over on my new Patreon. There I'll be releasing bonus videos with every new video here. We can do some live chats, Q&As, you can give me video requests. Really, whatever you guys want that I can provide, I'll just do over there. So if you want to support me, check out the link below, no pressure. Okay, let's see what other nonsense she has to say.
And so there was some award-winning research around 2012 to 2014 when we were beginning to understand how important the cleaning of the brain is overnight. So this entirely new system that we didn't know existed, which is called the glymphatic system, that system is a very active kind of waterway channel cleansing system of the brain. We used to think that the fluid around the brain, and there's ventricles, which are like lakes, and then there's just like trickling areas that sort of passively dripped through the brain overnight. We did not expect to see like jets of fluid flushing out toxins from the brain. So one of the things I do say to people who don't sleep well is, if you find yourself awake at night and you're not lying on your side, turn yourself onto your side, because that's the best position for this cleansing process. That is a better position in terms of the veins in your neck.
So what she said about the glymphatic system is true. I don't know where she got the sleeping on your side and veins on your neck thing from. I found an article which I'm pretty sure is the one she's using for this claim. It found that in mice, glymphatic transport was better when they were on their side than their back or belly. Now, I don't have to tell you that mouse physiology and human physiology are pretty different. You know, the findings of this article open up the idea of testing it in humans, but it hasn't been done yet. So I'm not saying that she's wrong, maybe it is better to sleep on your side, but we don't know that yet. By the way, if I happen to be wrong about something here, if there is a study that she's actually citing that found that, I mean, let me know. I'm totally happy to admit that I'm wrong.
We don't have to like reinvent the wheel at all. We can just go back to doing the things that we did when we were at peace.
Interesting. But that's not easy to do in the world we live in, because we've built a society and a world where we live in these like four white walls in cities alone.
Yeah.
We're more lonely than ever before. We order our food using glass screens. We use pornography as a replacement for intimacy and connection. We use social networks instead of socializing. Internet connection has reduced real connection.
Okay, Steven. Coming through with the poetry. Damn. Wait a second. Doesn't Steve kind of look like Steve? Is that fucked up to say? I mean, he's a handsome guy. It's just when you have a squared jawline and a squared off cut, you're gonna look a little Minecraftian.
How you'd have to like completely redesign society, it seems.
You can start with yourself.
We can start with you, Stephen. You specifically need to change. But okay, I'm getting off topic. So this next part was about how the language we use about ourselves can cause physical changes in ourselves, and how she proved this to her eye doctor.
But you were going to get, was it like laser eye surgery or something?
No, it's just like...
People told you needed glasses.
Well, my optician told me. So he said, I think, you're probably going to need reading glasses next year. And I was like, no, I do not want reading glasses. That makes you look really old. And he was like, yeah, I know we both look younger than we are, but, your eyes are going to age just like anybody else's. And I was like, no, they are not. So I left, came back a year later. He said, how's it going with the reading? I said, it's fine. And he sort of went, okay, Tara. So he's doing my eye test. He spins round on his little chair halfway through and says, your eyes haven't got worse. They haven't even stayed the same. They've got better.
And then everyone clapped.
He said, what have you been doing? And I said, well, I just said no to you when you said, I'm going to have to get reading glasses. You asked me, is language important to our brain? That's how important it is.
Okay, I think it's true that language can affect us physically. I think there is a top-down connection from the mind to the body. I just don't believe that that's what made her vision better. I think it's more likely that there's an average amount of error in eye testing that can cause results to sometimes look like this. But hey, maybe it's right. Maybe that's how I'll grow taller. I'll just think about the fact that I'm done growing vertically and be like, no. I'm just gonna keep growing, thank you very much. And no thank you. But okay, real talk, it sucks that experts are going on podcasts and spreading misinformation like this. It's probably worse than regular misinformation because people are gonna listen to these things and just believe them to be true because these are supposed to be trusted sources. This is a symptom of a greater disease because Dr. Tara Swart is not the only scientist doing this. James Smith made an excellent video about this where he explains the business model of podcasts and how it promotes different scientists to come on and either spread misinformation or give contradictory information from the scientist that was on the same podcast last week. But to me, the real problem I see is not with misinformation, it's with trust. If one scientist on one podcast is spewing nonsense, then how can I trust any scientist on any podcast? In this episode with Dr. Swart, she actually says some pretty interesting things. Some things I fact-checked and found out that she was right about, so I actually learned some things. But because of the things she said that were stupid, I wasn't sure if I could trust anything until I checked for myself. And out of the 12 million people that listened to this, I feel like less than 100 people actually did that, which is perfectly fine because they shouldn't have to. If I'm just casually listening to a podcast, I don't want to have to check primary literature to validate what they're saying. I want to be able to trust the expert. That's kind of the whole point. Look, I actually think that Dr. Swart is a great scientist. She has plenty of accolades, and if you look at the comments, a lot of people found a lot of help from this episode. But those same people also believe that their friend Becky is the alpha female over them. They're gonna start sleeping on their side for no reason. And they're not gonna hire someone because they believe that that person is too stressed and they're gonna spread that to everyone else at the company. It is incredibly irresponsible to go on a large platform and just be so flat out wrong and so confidently wrong too, which I think is what really irks me the most. If there's anything I've learned about great scientists in my time in research, it's that they know how little they know. They're not just aware of all the knowledge in their field, but all the gaps too. So be careful when listening to these experts, especially if it seems like they have the answers to the universe. Chances are, they're just making some shit up. There is no shortage of misinformation out there, so if you enjoyed this format, I'm happy to do it again, just let me know in the comments. Again, I have a bonus on my Patreon where I go into this episode a lot more in depth, and a bunch of other perks if you're interested, and come say hi in my Discord. Links are below. Bye.